After Dad's funeral, while the grief was still fresh and condolences poured in, the conversation in our living room took an unexpected turn. Instead of mourning, people started talking about who would get what from his estate money, stocks, assets. That's when my brother-in-law Chris, married to my sister Kelly, boldly declared, all of it, including the $5 million, should go to Kelly. She's the eldest. It's only right. He was grinning, so was Kelly. But the estate lawyer quickly shut that down. I'm afraid that's not how this works. Let me back up. My name is John Watson. I'm 42, work in sales, married with 2 kids. My father, despite his age, was a majority shareholder in a thriving company and remained active in business until the very end. Kelly, my older half-sister, has always been a source of tension. She was rebellious growing up, constantly clashing with our parents. Even now, in her 50s, she still doesn't have a steady job and just floats through life, carefree and often reckless. We were never close, and frankly, I've kept my distance. Then, one day, she introduced Chris, a smug, younger man with no drive and a bad attitude. We're getting married, she announced like it was some grand triumph. Almost immediately, she began pestering Dad for wedding money. He reluctantly gave in, but she burned through it fast, coming back for more. She acted entitled, assuming she'd inherit everything eventually anyway. Then came the shock. Less than a year after her wedding, Dad suffered a heart attack on the golf course. He passed away a few days later. I was devastated. Our phones didn't stop ringing with people offering condolences, but I couldn't let myself fall apart. Mom was completely shattered, so I stepped up to make the funeral arrangements. As expected, Kelly was missing in action for most of it. After the service, emotionally and physically drained, Mom and I finally had a quiet moment. But the next morning, a lawyer arrived to go over Dad's will. Kelly and Chris burst in, totally unprepared and unaware of what was actually in the document. That didn't stop Chris from loudly announcing, all of Dad's assets go to my wife, the eldest daughter. That's final. Mom and I sat there, stunned by their arrogance. Chris pumped his fist and shouted, "We did it, Kelly. We're set for life." The lawyer calmly intervened. "Hold on, Kelly. You're not entitled to any inheritance." Their smugness dissolved instantly. "What? That's impossible," Kelly cried. "I'm the oldest. Of course I get everything." But then came the bombshell. "Did you not know?" the lawyer asked. "Kelly is not Mr. Watson's biological child." The room fell silent. Kelly turned to our mother, her face pale. Mom looked shaken. I had known all along that Kelly was from Mom's previous marriage, but it was clear no one had told her. "Kelly," Mom said quietly, "you're from my first marriage." Kelly stared at her in disbelief, panic rising. "What does that mean? Why wouldn't I inherit?" Chris, trying to salvage the situation, chimed in. "She's still his daughter, legally, right?" Kelly nodded quickly. "Yeah, I was adopted, wasn't I?" But Mom shook her head. "No. Your father had plans to adopt you, but he never went through with it." They were stunned. Kelly's voice rose. "That can't be true. I'm his daughter, always said so." Then she turned on me, seething. "I'm not letting you take everything." I met her glare. "After everything Dad did for you, after all the chances, the money, the patience, you still have the nerve to say that? Be quiet. I'm his son, his heir." Chris snapped. "There's nothing wrong with a father helping his daughter." I sighed. "No, there isn't." But Kelly wasn't just helped use Dad as a personal bank, constantly running to him with her problems and draining him dry. The lawyer, trying to maintain order, said, "Mrs. Watson, John, perhaps Kelly should hear the will herself." Kelly's face twisted. "What will? I don't know anything about it." Of course she didn't. When Dad had invited us to review the will together, she ignored it and went off shopping or partying, whatever seemed more important at the time. When I reminded her, Chris gave her a sharp look. "You what? This was important, Kelly." Grudgingly, they agreed to listen. The lawyer unfolded the document and began to read. The will made it clear the inheritance was to go entirely to me and our mother. Dad had considered adopting Kelly, but decided against it because of her growing irresponsibility and her poor treatment of me, her younger half-brother. Kelly Saturday frowned. "I get nothing," she whispered. "This can't be happening." Chris' face darkened. "You lied to me. You said you were rich." He stood abruptly, voice loud and bitter. "You were supposed to be my ticket. You said you'd inherit millions." He shoved past her and stormed out, leaving everyone speechless. Kelly stood there, red-faced and trembling. She looked from me to our mother, voice cracking. "Mom, why didn't you make sure I was adopted? Why does he get everything?" But no one answered. And for once, she didn't have the last word. "I should have gotten something too. You didn't handle this right. This is awful." "Mom," Kelly sobbed, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. She was causing a scene, but I could tell the lawyer wasn't fazed. He'd probably seen this kind of drama more times than he could count. "Why does he get everything?" she demanded, pointing at me, like I'd stolen something from her. "Because I'm Dad's son," I replied calmly. Her eyes narrowed in rage. Then, without warning, she lunged at me, screaming, "It would have been better if you were never born." I didn't react. In truth, even if I hadn't been born, Dad wouldn't have left everything to her. He knew who she was. Before I could respond, the lawyer stepped in, his voice firm. "Kelly, if this behavior continues, I'll be forced to involve the police." That made her flinch. I saw a flicker of fear cross her face, maybe remembering her old shoplifting record. "Kelly," our mother whispered tearfully. 6 months passed. The inheritance process moved forward without any surprises. The lawyer's professionalism left no room for interference, though Kelly and Chris grumbled and sulked in the background. Mom, ever the peacemaker, quietly gave Kelly a bit of money. I didn't argue, but it stung when Kelly and Chris vanished, almost immediately afterward, taking the money and disappearing without a word. Their opportunism didn't go unnoticed. Her relatives were disgusted. One evening, my wife suggested we take Mom out for dinner. It had been a tough few months, and since Dad's passing, she'd become more reserved. But our daughter's presence brought a smile to her face. The warmth of family softened her edges. "Mom," I said over dessert, "why don't you come live with us?" She hesitated. "What about Kelly? She'll still come around sometimes. You know she only shows up when she needs something. Don't let her take advantage of you," I said gently. Mom didn't answer. I understood. No matter how Kelly acted, she was still her daughter, and if Mom moved in with us, it might stir more trouble. I told her to think about it and started driving her back to the family home. As we pulled into the driveway, something fell off. The lights were on, even though no one was supposed to be there, not even the housekeeper. "Maybe Kelly's back," I muttered, parking in the garage. "Let's just go in for a quick coffee." As we stepped out of the car and approached the entrance, a vehicle suddenly came speeding toward us. I heard my daughter scream and instinctively pushed my wife out of the way. The car clipped me and sent me flying into the flower bed. Pain exploded through my shoulder. The vehicle crashed into the garage wall and came to a screeching halt. My wife and daughter ran to me. My mom stood frowning in shock. I was taken to the hospital and kept overnight for observation. Luckily, my injuries weren't too serious, but what I learned later chilled me. The driver was Chris' brother-in-law. He told the police he'd mistaken the gas pedal for the brake, but I didn't believe a word of it. When Mom and Kelly visited me the next day, Kelly didn't even ask if I was okay. Instead, she said coldly, "You're tougher than you look." I smirked. "Too bad for you." She stiffened. "What's that supposed to mean?" I met her gaze. "Mom told me she's planning to waive her share and pass it to me. So if you were hoping this little accident would change anything, it didn't." Her face twisted in disbelief. "She's giving up her share," she repeated, stunned. "She wants the money to go to her grandchildren, to my wife and kids. That's what parents do." "But that doesn't make sense," she protested. "I already made a will myself, just like Dad did. So even if something happens to me, it's all taken care of." Kelly was speechless, her face twitched with barely concealed rage. "There's $5 million. Can't you give me some?" she pleaded. "No. Her desperation turned vicious. She grabbed my hospital gown and hissed, "Give me half. I'm your sister." I looked at her, pity rising above the anger. "Don't you get it? This greed. This is why Dad made the choices he did." She screamed and lunged for my throat. "Kelly, what are you doing?" Mom cried, bursting in with the nurses. They pulled her off me and dragged her from the room. Even then, Mom tried to defend her, but it was clear Kelly had turned her venom on our mother too. Later, Mom slumped in a chair beside my dad, her voice small and broken. Where did I go wrong raising her? Not long after, Mom's health declined rapidly. My wife and I stepped in handling errands, doctor visits, everything that needed doing. Kelly didn't like it. Maybe it was guilt, or maybe it was just jealousy. One day, out of nowhere, Kelly called. "We'll take care of Mom now. You and your wife don't need to come anymore." "What are you talking about?" I asked, already sensing something wasn't right. "I've decided. It's done," she said coldly, then hung up. I checked with my wife. She'd gotten the same message. We were both shut out. Mom didn't say much, but she confirmed it. Apparently, Chris had some caregiving experience. Still, I was uneasy. Kelly wasn't exactly known for being responsible. At first, things seemed fine. Mom still sounded okay, but within weeks, she was rushed to the hospital. A medication error, they said. She looked frail too frail. The doctor was confused. "She's never made mistakes like this before," he said. While my wife stayed with her, I returned to the family home. It was a mess. The kitchen was bare. The fridge was empty. The warmth that used to fill that house was gone. And apparently, the helper had been let go without consulting anyone. I stood in the doorway, the silence thick and heavy, and knew something was very, very wrong. I felt a deep, burning shame for ever having considered trusting my sister, and fury. A large sum had been withdrawn from my mother's personal bank account despite her card and PIN being locked in a secure safe. Thankfully, the account holding her inheritance remained untouched in a separate safe deposit box, but much of the money meant for her daily needs was gone. I packed essentials for her hospital stay clothes, toiletries, and the bank card and returned to the hospital to speak with her. "Mom, did Kelly take the card?" I asked quietly. She looked confused, clearly unaware anything had gone missing, but when I brought up the medication error that landed her in the hospital, her expression changed. She lowered her gaze. "Chris prepared it," she said softly. I closed my eyes for a moment, the weight of it sinking in. "Mom, I think it's time to stop letting Kelly into the house," I said gently. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she studied my face with maternal worry. "John, I promised I'd take care of you, but you've lost so much weight. Have you even been eating properly?" Her words struck a nerve. "Come live with us," I said. "I'll build a home where we can all be together somewhere safe, peaceful." She began to cry. Despite the doctor's care, her health declined rapidly. Maybe the stress of betrayal had broken something inside her. She passed away quietly, not long after, almost as if she followed Dad into the next life. When I returned to the family home to prepare for her funeral, I found the place ransacked. All the valuables, jewelry, antiques, heirlooms are gone. Kelly and Chris had cleaned it out. I stood alone in the empty rooms, the silence pressing in, and a storm of anger welled up inside me. This wasn't grief anymore. It was betrayal, and I vowed I wouldn't let it go unanswered. The day after Mom's funeral, Kelly and I met at the lawyer's office, supposedly to finalize the inheritance. "Too bad for you," she said with smug confidence. "Mom's inheritance belongs to me. I'm her only daughter." I chuckled. "Let's see what the will says." As the lawyer opened the file, Kelly's confidence melted away. She turned pale. "No, this can't be happening. Kelly is not entitled to inherit anything," the lawyer said firmly. "That was your father's explicit wish." Chris lost it. He slammed his fist on the table, sending papers flying. "This is a scam. Kelly's her biological daughter. You think you can just cheat us?" I remained calm. "Chris, did you try to harm my mother?" "What? Of course not," he snapped. Then how do you explain the medication error? He waved it off with an angry sneer. Who cares about that? What matters is that we were cut out of the inheritance. Kelly turned to him, her voice shaking. What did you do? Her question came too late. She hadn't even come to see Mom in her final days. It was clear now that she had been counting on the inheritance to bail her out. I'm getting nothing, she asked the lawyer. After deducting the unauthorized withdrawals and the value of the stolen property, the lawyer replied carefully, there's barely anything left. She stared at the floor, hands trembling. This was all reviewed in advance, I said. Mom knew what was happening. No, Kelly whispered. It can't be this little. She had no idea how money worked. She had coasted her whole life on our parents' support, never learning how to earn or preserve anything. Mom thought you'd care for her. Instead, you took what you could and left her alone, I said sharply. Taking care of someone costs money. You think it's free, she snapped. Then show me your expenses. I'll reimburse you if you can prove it. Her eyes widened. I don't have receipts. Without proof, none of it is recognized, the lawyer added firmly. Chris, seeing things spiral, tried a different tactic. John, come on, she's your sister. She just needs a little help. No, I said flatly. His frustration spilled out. If things had gone the way they were supposed to, we'd have everything by now. What do you mean by that? I asked, my eyes narrowing. Chris sneered, not realizing what he was admitting. Because of you, everything went wrong. I was supposed to get a new car, now I'm stuck with a busted one. Kelly gasped. Chris, shut up. But it was too late. The lawyer calmly reached for a recorder. You do realize this meeting has been recorded. You both agreed to that at the beginning. Chris blanched. And what you just said? The lawyer continued. It sounds a lot like fraud and possibly attempted harm. I looked at Chris directly. I'll be pressing charges for the accident. He scoffed. You've got nothing. Actually, I said, you just gave me everything I need. Kelly turned on him, her eyes wild with rage. You idiot. You ruined everything. What now? Chris was arrested. The investigation unearthed his prior offenses and reckless behavior. He was detained and eventually convicted. Kelly, implicated as his accomplice, received a lighter sentence but was left with nothing. No money, no home, and no sympathy. When she reached out to relatives, begging for help, she was turned away at every door. As for me, I went back to work. I didn't live for the inheritance. I lived for the life my parents had raised me to build in discipline, responsibility, and respect. Every now and then, when the dividends from that stocks came in, I allowed myself a quiet moment of gratitude. Not for the money but for the values it passed on.